So today we are going to discuss a very important lesson in your advanced level biology syllabus, which is immunity or the immune system of humans. The objectives of today's lesson are to explain the concept of immunity and the immune system, to differentiate between the non-specific arm of our immune system, which is the innate immunity, and the specific immunity, which is also known as adaptive immunity. Third objective is to describe the components and functions of both innate and adaptive immune responses. And the fourth objective is to discuss disorders related to the immune system, including allergies, autoimmune diseases, and immune deficiency diseases. So let's move on to the definition of immunity. So immunity is the state of being resistant to injury or disease caused by pathogens or foreign substances. So there are so many microorganisms in our environment. Not only in our environment, even on our skin. Actually, it is estimated that on the surface, in the skin surface of a human being, it is estimated that there are about 38 trillion bacteria. It is even more than the total number of cells in your body. So actually, even though we call ourselves as individuals, so we are actually composed of, we are actually an ecosystem composed of so many microorganisms from their point of view. Right, so they are like an ecosystem for those microorganisms. So majority is bacteria, and there are fungi and viruses as well. Right, so immunity is the state of being resistant. So there is a state of being resistant to injury or diseases caused by pathogens such as bacteria or other foreign substances. So our immune system is like a sophisticated security system that distinguishes between what's part of us, which we can call as self, and what's not a part of us, that we can call as non-self. Right? So here you can see a diagram. So our immune system has that ability to detect non-self cells from our own cells. Otherwise, it can attack our own cells as well. If it cannot differentiate between self and non-self. So that is very important. So pathogens, on the other hand, are agents that cause infectious diseases. So this include bacteria, viruses, and fungi, which you will learn in your microbiology lesson. Immune system also protects us from other foreign substances. There are various allergens like pollen grains, then it can be incompatible blood cells. If blood is transfused to a human, if the blood groups are incompatible, then immune reactions take place against the transfused blood. And also, this protects us from transplanted, or actually it's not a protection response. So some people undergo various transplants, such as kidney transplant, liver transplant, etc. So transplant is taken from another individual. So it is important to match various types of immune markers before transplantation is done. Otherwise, the transplant will get rejected by the immune system. So the immune system can be divided into two branches. One is innate immunity and the other one is adaptive immunity. So first we will discuss about innate immunity, which is the non-specific arm of the immune system. So innate immunity in our body is our body's inherent ability to resist disease through rapid, non-specific responses. So the activity is rapid. However, the responses are non-specific. That is, it is not directed to a specific microorganism, but it's quite a general response. Right? It's like the general security measures that protect a building, which is quick and broad. So, innate immunity include external defenses as well as internal defenses. So, external defenses of the innate immunity are the first line defenses against a pathogenic insult or an external insult. Our skin acts as an external defense in our innate immunity. But here you can see a cross-section diagram showing the layers or the parts of the skin. So the outermost layer is the epidermis, which is composed of a keratinized epithelium, a keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Then there is the dermis, which includes several parts, including glands, receptors, nerve cells, nerves, blood vessels, etc. And underneath the dermis, there is the endodermis, which is mainly composed of fat cells or adipocytes. So the skin acts as a physical barrier with tightly packed cells in the epidermis, and this prevents the entry of microorganisms into our bodies. And also this epidermis, which is composed of this epithelial layer, helps to remove microbes by shedding the outermost shells. So this is a rapidly growing epithelium by mitotic cell division. So this shedding skin cells also helps to remove extra, cannot say it as extra, but it helps to remove microbes from the skin. The second way in which the external defenses of the innate immunity acts is through mucous membranes. So these line our body cavities and they can secrete mucus by specialized cells known as goblet cells. So this mucus can trap microorganisms in them and ultimately lead to their removal. So we can see this mucous membranes in our respiratory tracts, mainly in our respiratory tract, right? So you can see in this diagram there is a ciliated columnar epithelium which lines, actually this is called a pseudostratified columnar epithelium, because you can see several layers of cells here. The nuclei are in two layers, however there is only one layer of cells actually, so that is why we are naming this as a pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Columnar means the shape of the cells are column shaped, and in this epithelium here and there are goblet cells. So these goblet cells have the ability to secrete this mucus, and also this is ciliated. The apical surface, there are cilia. So this cilia can move mucus and trapped particles out of the body. So that is also an external defense mechanism in our innate immunity. So the next one is secretions. So you know there are so many secretions in our body. Examples are tears, saliva, and also in the stomach gastric juice is secreted, and in the skin sweat and sebum are secreted. So tears and saliva contains an enzyme called lysozyme. So this lysozyme enzyme has the ability to destroy cell walls of certain bacteria. So thereby it destroys some bacteria. And the gastric juice, you know, is acidic. So it contains hydrochloric acid. So this acidity is not suitable for many bacteria, many microorganisms, right? So by that they can kill those microbes. And sweat and sebum also is acidic, so it makes the skin a little bit acidic. thereby inhibiting bacterial growth. So these external defenses of the innate immune system can be breached in some instances. So if pathogens breach these external barriers, then the internal defenses of our innate immunity comes in. So phagocytic cells plays a crucial role in the internal defenses of our innate immunity. So innate means still we are considering a general response. This is not specific. This is non-specific. So there are many types of phagocytic cells. One example is neutrophils. So neutrophil is a white blood cell. So it is found in our blood. So through capillaries, they can leak into tissues as well. So there are neutrophils in our tissues, especially areolar tissues as well. So they can act as phagocytic cells. So neutrophils, they act as first responders that ingest and destroy invaders such as bacteria that breach the first line defenses. Then there are macrophages. They are a little bit larger cells that engulf pathogens and also some dead cells. So here you can see a diagram of phagocytosis, which is a part of the innate immunity internal defense, right? So this is a phagocyte, for instance. Let's think that this is a macrophage. So there are special receptors in this plasma membrane of these phagocytes. So here you can see a pathogen. So these receptors can identify some specific molecules in the pathogen, which can trigger the phagocytic action. Right? These are amoeba-like cells. So the cytoplasm of the cell can move and engulf these pathogens. So this is how it is doing that. And after engulfing this pathogen, it forms a membrane-bound structure called a phagosome. Then ultimately this phagosome can get combined with a lysosome, which contains various enzymes that can ultimately destroy that ingested pathogen. So this is how phagocytes such as macrophages and neutrophils work. The other type of cell is called natural killer cells or NK cells. So they can detect abnormal cells like virus infected cells or even cancerous cells, and they release chemicals to kill them. So this is very important in cancer biology as well, these NK cells, because if these NK cells are not properly functioning, such people has increased tendency to develop cancers, right? So these NK cells are important in destroying various virus infected cells as well as cancer cells. And there are antimicrobial proteins acting as internal defenses in innate immunity. So there are so many types of antimicrobial proteins. So they can be broadly categorized into interferons and complement proteins. So interferons are secreted by virus infected cells. So if a virus, for instance, let's say a coronavirus infects a cell in your respiratory tract, so by that cell, that cell secretes interferons, which are specialized proteins, right? So these interferons are secreted by virus infected cells to protect neighboring cells by inhibiting viral replication. So that already infected cell can get destroyed by that virus, but the importance of these interferons is they tell the neighboring cells that you are in danger. A virus is about to come to you as well, and it can destroy you. So be ready. protect yourself from that virus. So that is how these interferons act, right? So there is another antimicrobial protein type called complement proteins. So that is a group of proteins that when activated lead to the lysis of pathogens and enhance phagocytosis, as we discussed earlier. So there are so many complement types as well. So in this diagram you can see this C2, C4, C4b, C2a. So this C letter denotes complement. So there are so many types of complement, and there is a pathway known as complement pathway in our bodies, right? So they are antimicrobial proteins. The other part of the internal defense mechanisms in innate immunity is known as the inflammatory response. So inflammation occurs when tissues are damaged. So the main agent that leads to inflammation is called histamine. So this histamine, after the histamine is released by the so-called mast cells, right? So mast cells release histamine. So they causes the nearby blood vessels to dilate, and ultimately they become more permeable, right? So this permeability of blood vessels increase. So in the blood there are so many types of white blood cells, mainly neutrophils are there, which can act as phagocytes. So more and more neutrophils can get recruited to the site of inflammation after the release of this histamine and when blood vessels gets dilated. So there are some symptoms or features of this inflammation. I know all of you have experienced inflammation in various instances in your life. For instance, let's say if you're bitten by a mosquito, that area gets red and swollen, and you might feel a pain. Right? So that is because of inflammation. And if you get pricked by a sharp object, so the same thing will happen, right? So the features or symptoms of inflammation are redness, heat, swelling, and pain. So redness and heat is due to increased blood flow to that area. Swelling is basically due to fluid leakage into the tissues, and pain is from the stimulation of pain sensitive nerve endings in that area and from pressure due to swelling. So you can see how inflammation is taking place due to an injury. So here you can see a sharp object has breached the skin, that is called tissue injury. So this tissue injury leads to the release of chemical signals, that is histamine, from mast cells in this loose connective tissue. Right? So then there is this the release of histamine causes dilation and increased leakiness of the capillaries, and phagocytes like neutrophils can migrate to this area of injury. Then ultimately these phagocytes can engulf and kill bacteria and cellular debris. So this is how inflammation is taking place. You can see the four features: pain, swelling, redness, and warmth. So that is about innate arm of our immune system. Now we'll move on to the adaptive or acquired immunity, which is the specific defense system of our bodies. So this innate immunity and adaptive immunity are working together to protect yourself, to protect us from various pathogens and various injuries. So adaptive immunity is characterized by specificity and memory. So specificity means this targets specific pathogens, unlike the innate immune system, which is non-specific. And this has memory. So the innate immunity did not have memory, but this adaptive immune system is characterized by memory. That means it can remember previous invaders for a faster response upon re-exposure. Lymphocytes are the key players in adaptive immunity. There are two main types of lymphocytes. One is B lymphocytes and the other one is T lymphocytes. So B and T, you can remember them because B lymphocytes mature in the bone marrow, which also starts with a B, and are responsible for the so-called humoral immunity. So humoral means body fluids. Humor is a body fluid. So these B lymphocytes are important in this body fluid or humoral immunity. And T lymphocyte, you can remember the letter T. So it comes from this thymus. So T lymphocytes mature in the thymus. So both B and T lymphocytes are produced by the bone marrow. However, maturation step takes place in two different places. For B lymphocytes takes place in the bone marrow, and in T lymphocytes takes place in the thymus. And these T cells are responsible for the so-called cell-mediated immunity. Right, so that's the difference between these two cells. And when discussing this acquired immunity or adaptive immunity, there is another important thing that you need to consider, that is antigens. So antigen is any substance that can elicit an immune response. So anything can act as an antigen. For example, a part of a bacteria, a part of a virus, a pollen grain, a part of a pollen grain, or even artificial things such as molecules in the, for example, say plastics or rubber or anything in the environment can act as an antigen which can trigger an immune response. So in the antigen, the specific part of that antigen that binds to a receptor, right? So receptors, there are several types of receptors. So receptors are there in the previously discussed B cells and T cells. So in this diagram, this Y-shaped molecule in the B cell, which is called also known as an antibody, is a B cell receptor. Here the red colored molecule here in the T cell plasma membrane is a T cell receptor. So there are some differences between these two receptors, B cell receptors and T cell receptors. So epitope is the specific part of the antigen that binds to this B cell receptor or the T cell receptor. So you can see in the antigen there are various epitopes. So you can see in this green color one, red color one, blue color one. Here, so these are antibodies or B cell receptors, right? So these antibodies can come and bind to these epitopes in the antigen. So this diagram shows an antibody which is also a protein. So we also call these units as immunoglobulins. So globulins are proteins, so these are also known as immunoglobulins. So this humoral immunity of this adaptive immunity part is also known as antibody mediated immunity. So you can see in the B cells there are B cell receptors, so they are also antibodies. So these receptors can get dispatched from this plasma membrane and move on to body fluids. Then we can call them as soluble antibodies. So upon recognizing an antigen, actually B cells, they differentiate into a mature form of cell known as a plasma cell. So actually it is the plasma cell that secrete antibodies. So these B cells, the antibodies are bound. Actually these B cell receptors are bound to these B cells, plasma membrane. So when this B cell matures into a plasma cell, they are the plasma cells that can secrete this antibody into the body fluid. So actually it is not the B cell that secretes antibodies, but the plasma cell. So antibodies are Y-shaped proteins or immunoglobulins that specifically bind to antigens. So after binding, they can either neutralize that antigen or mark them for destruction. So in the this Y-shaped antibody, there are several areas. So this area is called as the constant area. So the terminal area, which is the antigen binding site, is the variable area. This light colored area is the variable area. There are two polypeptide chains. Actually, there are four, and this is symmetrical molecule. This blue colored chain is called the heavy chain because it is longer, and this red color chain is the light chain. So these are the parts of a antibody or an immunoglobulin. So this diagram shows how this B cell progenitor gets matured and becomes a plasma cell. This plasma cell can then secrete antibodies. Then we'll move on to cell-mediated immunity. So earlier we discussed humoral immunity or antibody-mediated immunity. So this is cell-mediated immunity. So T cells are important, or T lymphocytes are important in this cell-mediated immunity. So T cells also has receptors like this, right? So these T cells can recognize antigen fragments presented by a special type of cell called antigen presenting cells. So various cells in your body can act as antigen presenting cells. So there are two types of T lymphocytes. One is cytotoxic T cells that directly kill the infected or the abnormal cells, and the other type is known as helper T cells. So they assist in activating B cells and activating cytotoxic T cells. So here in this diagram you can see a T helper cell acting as an antigen presenting cell, and via a specific type of molecule known as this MHC class 2, it can present a part of an antigen, right, to a phagocyte. So after that they release cytokines, so which are antimicrobial proteins, right? So not antimicrobial, actually cytokines are specific type of protein, right, released by these cells. So these cytokines can in turn activate cytotoxic T cells. Then this cytotoxic T cell can directly bind to the infected cell with the infected cell, and by various mechanisms it can kill the infected cell, leading to cell death. So this is how the cell-mediated immunity is functioning. This is actually a bit complex process, but you need not to know everything related to this. This is just an overview of how this cell-mediated immunity is functioning. So another important aspect in adaptive immunity is clonal selection and memory. So clonal selection means these lymphocytes, either T or B lymphocytes, can proliferate into clones specific to an antigen. That means in a clone, all the cells are alike, identical. Right? So, and the other function is memory. So there are cells known as memory cells. So it can be memory B cells or memory T cells. Let's say a specific bacteria or a virus. Let's say you are exposed to COVID-19 virus. So when you are exposed to this COVID-19 virus, and when your cells are invaded by this COVID-19 virus, these immune responses take action, and B cells function to make antibodies, and T cells come and directly kill the infected cells. Right, so that is how our immune system is functioning. So at the same time, by clonal selection, these T and B cells they divide, they produce a clone of cells that are specific to that antigen. In our case, it is the COVID-19 virus. So these memory cells, they are in circulation in your blood. So let's say that after some time, let's say in about 1 month, again you are exposed to COVID-19. Then these memory cells, they rapidly recognize this COVID-19 virus and they rapidly kills that virus, unlike in that first instance which took some time for the process of destroying that virus. But here, if you are exposed exposed for the second time for that same virus, these memory cells, they provide a faster and stronger response. So that is how these memory cells are working. So that is about this innate and adaptive arms of our immune system. And now let's move on to two other categories of immunity known as active immunity and passive immunity. So active immunity can be divided into two types again: naturally acquired active immunity and artificially acquired natural immunity. So naturally acquired active immunity means immunity developed after exposure to a pathogen. So active in the sense refers to the active production of antibodies within your body. So that is what is active referring to. So naturally acquired active immunity means immunity developed after exposure to a pathogen, such as recovering from an infection. The previous example that we took, after exposure to COVID-19, actively your body is producing antibodies. The plasma cells produce antibodies, and these antibodies and memory cells are there in your system, in your blood, which after a subsequent exposure brings forth a rapid immune response. And the other part is artificially acquired immunity. So this is done by vaccination. So vaccination is a bit similar to a natural infection. The difference is vaccines are produced. There are several types of vaccine. One type of vaccine is called inactivated vaccine. So in that inactivated vaccine, we are putting let's say COVID-19. So what we can do is we can use a specialized form of corona virus, COVID-19 virus, which is inactivated, which is inactive. That means that virus is unable to make you symptomatic, but after exposure to that virus, your body produces these antibodies and these memory cells, and our body is still producing them. So we call that active immunity, but we are artificially injecting the vaccine. So we are artificially injecting antigens to our system, right? It can be either killed viruses or some parts of viruses in these vaccines. So immunity developed after exposure to antigens via vaccines is called artificially acquired active immunity. And passive immunity is also there. Again, we can categorize passive immunity, naturally acquired passive immunity, and artificially acquired passive immunity. Passive means the antibodies are not created in your own bodies, but the antibodies are there, and we are taking them from outside. So example for naturally acquired passive immunity is antibodies from the mother passing into the fetus. So that provides short-term immunity from antibodies that are transferred from mother to the child. Examples for artificially acquired passive immunity is anti-venom administration. So there are anti-venom available, for example, let's say cobra bite or venomous serpents are there. So when they, if they bite a human being, so we can rapidly give antibodies within a short period of exposure to that. We can give artificial antibodies. So immunity from injected antibodies produced by another individual, or sometimes we can use another animal. Most of the time they use horses to produce these antivenom, right? So these artificially injected antibodies, they lead to artificially acquired passive immunity. The antibodies are not produced within your body itself, but they are given from outside. Right. So we are moving on to the final part of our lesson, disorders of the immune system. So the first one is allergies. Most of you have encountered allergies during your lifetime. So they are hypersensitive responses, means they are actually overreactions to harmless substances, which are also known as allergens, like pollen or anything can become an allergen. So there are some people who are allergic to various medications. There are some who are allergic to various foods, such as prawns, seafood, and some fruits and vegetables, right? So they result in symptoms such as sneezing, itching, a body rash, lacrimation, red eyes, right? So that is allergy. Then there is another special type of diseases called autoimmune diseases. So autoimmunity means your immune system is acting against your own self. So when starting this lesson, we discussed about something called as self and non-self. So naturally your immune system is able to identify non-self cells from your own cells. When this ability is disrupted, then these autoimmune diseases can happen. So that means immune system is attacking your own self. The examples for these autoimmune diseases is, one example is type 1 diabetes mellitus. So there are two types of diabetes mellitus, type 1 and type 2. So type 1 diabetes happens in young individuals in their childhood or their 20s. Type 2 is more common in these adults, elderly people. So that is the more common type. Type 2 is the common type. Type 1 is a bit rare. Right? In type 1 diabetes, the T lymphocytes go and destroy the insulin producing pancreatic beta cells. So your pancreas has areas called islets of Langerhans that has an endocrine function. So there are various types of cells in that. There are alpha cells that secrete glucagon, which is a hormone, and the beta cells secrete insulin, which is another hormone that leads to reduction of blood glucose levels. So these in type 1 diabetes, these T cells go and destroy the pancreatic beta cells. So the production of insulin will be reduced. There is another disease related to neurological system called multiple sclerosis, in which the T cells go and attack the myelin sheaths of neurons. So our neurons, the axons of the neuron, if of some neurons are covered by myelin sheets of Schwann cells or some other neuroglial cells. So in multiple sclerosis, these T cells go and attack the myelin sheath of these neurons. So another form of autoimmune disease is rheumatoid arthritis, in which the immune system attacks the joint tissues in your body. So you get joint pain and joint inflammation. There are various other types of autoimmune diseases like autoimmune encephalitis, SLE or systemic lupus erythematosus. So there are so many other autoimmune diseases. And there are immunodeficiency diseases as well, in which our immune responses become weak. So in that also there are inborn immunodeficiencies as well as acquired immunodeficiencies. Inborn means the genetic defects can affect your immune cells, which can lead to immunodeficiency. That means its cells are not functioning properly. And there are acquired immunodeficiencies, which are caused by external factors, such as some viruses. The most common example is HIV or human immunodeficiency virus, leading to AIDS, which is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So, in conclusion, our immune system is an intricate network that protects us from countless pathogens daily. Understanding how it works helps us appreciate its complexity and the importance of maintaining immune health through proper nutrition, hygiene, and vaccinations. So we'll discuss some MCQs on immunity in another video. Thank you.